You are listening to the People Centric Podcast, where we talk through the toughest challenges that people face at work and give practical advice to fixing those challenges. Thanks for joining our movement to create workplaces that are happier, healthier, aligned, and empowered by putting people at the center of all that we do. Hello, people-centric leaders. We are gathered here today to talk about the keeper test. It's actually the Netflix keeper test. Now, I really like some of Netflix policies. I've stolen some of them over the years. Back in the day, they had this great open time off policy. They called it unlimited time off, which I think is not real. But they had a great policy and I stole it and we use it at People Centric. They also have these great quotes in their employee onboarding that I really liked. And so Netflix does some cool stuff with their policy sometimes. So I kind of watch what they do. And recently I saw that they put out something called the Netflix Keeper Test. And I'm going to share it with you here today. And we're going to talk about it because it is a little extreme and a little crazy, but it caused us to have a conversation. So here's the test. The test is, as managers and leaders, would you, looking at your staff, would you, A, hire this person again, knowing everything that you know, or if they came to you and said, I'm going to leave, would you fight for them to stay? And if not, if the answer is no to either one of those questions, you should work to offboard that person. And I just thought that was a little wild. Now, luckily, I immediately thought of my own team, who I will share. They're here today. I immediately thought of my own team and I was like, I'm keeping everyone. You all passed the Netflix keeper test. And I am really excited for that.
We were really nervous which one of us, if not both of us, you were about to give some powerful news to. Yeah. Live, how to have difficult conversations with a team that deserves them.
Right. No, that was Philip. Philip, you passed with flying colors. I immediately thought I would hire Philip again tomorrow. I would go through the whole process to have him. And if you decided you wanted to leave and go somewhere else, I would be like, please stay. Don't go. What can we do? So, Philip, thank you for being on our team.
That's wonderful. And Bethany, we made the decision also. You must stay. And Diana, right back at you.
Yes. I was going to say, I don't think I would pass the keeper test. I think knowing all that we know, Diana's a little bit of a slave driver, a little bit harsh. We probably won't keep her. She's going to
None of that is true.
And Bethany, I thought of you and I was like, man, she's a keeper. Our team is just full of keepers.
Keepers. I like it. I like us. So that's good to know.
I know. So having said that, what was some of your initial reactions to that keeper test? What do you think about it?
Well, yeah, I did. I mean, when you listen to it, what is that? Was it Ken Coleman? Was that who was talking about it? The video that we heard it on.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you hear it initially, I think the reaction is a little bit like, oh. But when you actually think about it, you're like, no, I mean, I think there's a lot of goodness to that. I think it could be done really poorly, right? So I think that if you hear that and you've maybe just had bad experiences in your workplace or really not empathetic leaders or things like that, and they came to you and they were just like, yeah, we did this keeper test and you didn't pass, so I guess you're out of here, then I think then that feels really heartless. And I get it. I get how that could come across really poorly. But I think if you're being realistic about it and you're really being able to consider who do I have on the team right now, and really evaluating that, I think that it can be really beneficial for the organization and for the person, because I think the conversation that we were having before we started recording was, we hear a lot of stories where organizations and leaders hold on to people for way too long, and they know that they are not good fits for the team, or their performance is really poor or whatever, and there's been ongoing issues that nobody's really done anything about. So there's that. That's a conversation to have. But they know, they see the kind of line in the sand, but they're just not willing to make that decision for lots of different reasons. And so maybe we can talk through the details of that. But I think for that reason, I think I looked at this and thought, like, man, I mean, I do think that there's a lot of validity to leaders thinking this way in general about the people on their team, and then figuring out, like, okay, if I know that there's somebody that I would not keep on the team, I would not fight for, what do I do with that? Does that mean you let them go immediately, or is there another step that needs to happen first?
I'm not a football person, and so it's terrible that I'm using a football analogy. This might be a bad idea. But there's something about being on a team. I think the idea, if you're on a team where if things weren't going well, you wouldn't be on the team anymore, in some ways, is actually kind of an awesome idea. And again, all this being like with good people-centric human appropriateness, right? Like one mistake doesn't mean you're off the team. But if you're a sports team, right? If your favorite NFL team is really not doing well and you realize maybe it's a coach, maybe it's the we're all in Chiefs country and watching the Super Bowl was painful. And it wasn't just because it's a one-off. There's like this habitual thing that they do that just makes their games wild, right? That's the extent of my football experience. Or if you're a nerdy choir folk and someone's perpetually off key, no one wants to be in a great choir when there's a large number of people that sing off key. That kind of defeats the purpose of your choir, right? So I think it's similar of a team that the kind of what I hear and what I imagine is, what if you were a part of a team that was so good and you valued a culture of being a good team and growing and success together, right? That you wouldn't keep longer than needed the wrong fit team members. That's probably better for them and for you, because nobody wants to feel like a failure anyway. And so I think Bethany's point is a really good one. There's a lot of nuance to this, but the larger sentiment of we want a really good team. And what if the assumption you may not be a part of the team forever? People might move, people might change things, might have other things that happen in life. But if your fit is not the same anymore, then like let's actually look into that and at least start talking about it rather than ignoring it. Because I had lunch with a friend yesterday who's in the same boat, loved the company he was a part of. The team has shifted and leaders are not doing anything about it. So they're redefining what it means to be a part of the team, not in a way that leads to more engagement and more alignment and more focus. It's less and it's more ego in place. So these are the things that make people leave in the long run.
Yeah. And Bethany, you were talking a little bit about, we see clients who keep people on their team that just don't fit, and they've kept them for too long, probably. Can you share maybe an example of what that looks like and why managers end up doing that? Like why do we keep people too long, and what does that look like?
Yeah. Well, there's lots of examples that we could probably share on this. But I think that sometimes there's different reasons for it. And we were having a conversation with a client about this yesterday, and them just sort of saying, okay, there's a couple of people who have recently left the team, and it just feels like they were here for too long anyways. Like, we kept seeing some of these performance issues. We kept seeing some pretty toxic behaviors show up. And I don't know why we even kept them on so long. And I think that it's like, sometimes I think a lot of people are afraid of having difficult conversations. They're not sure how to have those conversations. They maybe think that they had a conversation, but it wasn't really clear. Don uses a really good example. I don't even think I can mimic it, but it's like like, we're all links on a chain. And sometimes if somebody's the weakest link on the chain, then the chain starts to break, Do you know what I'm saying? Like that whole
No, I
conversation.
don't know what you're talking about.
Right. But it's like we think we have these conversations that are really clear, and we've addressed the problem, so we should be good now, but we actually didn't have a clear, difficult conversation that we needed to have. So I think there's some of that. I think sometimes people don't know, managers don't know, like, what's our policy around this kind of stuff too. So they're just like, I guess I can write them up maybe, but then like, how many times we have to write somebody up before it's okay to let them go? And then also the other side of that is like, even if you write somebody up, is that the best way to manage somebody in those situations? Is like, maybe you do have to write somebody up, but like, how do you keep managing them? Are you expecting that to solve all the problems as well? Or what do you do in between those write-ups, to make sure that people are being held accountable and trying to engage them and all of those things. And so I don't know, those are my first thoughts to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also sort of think that there is a difference between someone having like a bad season versus they're just like a bad fit, right? Like we all have stuff in our lives. And so I think managers sometimes go into it hoping maybe this is just a bad season or like they just are misaligned for a minute and we can fix this. And so they kind of wait it out a little bit too long while also not having the right conversations to get that person back on track. And so then if you're off track, you just keep going down the wrong track for too long. And then you're totally not together at all in any way. And I think, yeah, I think a lot of people it's so easy to get misaligned and it's so easy to have a bad season. And our lives affect our work. And anybody who says otherwise is crazy because it does. So, yeah, I think it's just so easy to get off track. And it's really easy for a manager to just like let them go down the wrong track for too long. And so I kind of think some of that is happening a little bit too. Okay, so what happens when Bethany, were you going to say
Sorry,
something?
I was going to also add another reason I think we see that too, or at least the excuse I think sometimes is people are like, well, we're having trouble hiring and it's really hard to find people. And at least this person shows up every day, like as long as somebody's doing the work. And I think that's one of those things that it's like, man, I don't know if that's really worth it though. And it's probably going to cost you more money in the long run. And so I think people do struggle with that sometimes with like, okay, I'm just having trouble getting people hired or then I have to train somebody again and I have to go through that whole process too. And so I think that's another reason I've heard from people as well.
It's so true. I mean, like hiring takes forever. Onboarding is really hard. Training is exhausting on everybody involved. Like, yeah, so there is something to this, like, well, they're here. They're here and they're doing some work. There's something to that of like, I can keep them because they're doing something, right? Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And we're working fine around it. We're working around it. But I think, man, that frustrates people. Have you guys seen when someone who is, let's say, not a keeper, right, is a part of a team? Have you seen how those people affect others, not just the manager, but like how do those people affect the coworkers around them?
Yeah, I think that we have many examples, many stories where this happens. And I love the question of not just a manager, but a wider team. Even I think my friend's example, it's a little bit more like, well, how I do business a certain way and like a certain standard and process. His example was someone took a client of his, kind of upsold some things, but took a client, did some things. And the pressure around just to make certain goals for the wider team, they're like, well, yeah, okay, at least they did what they needed to do, was the response from leadership. So in a team standpoint, you're like, well, I guess our goals are, we prioritize the profit piece above how we function as a team. We need both of these to work really well. But for him, it was like, wow, this is not only disenchanting, it actually makes a difference at the end of the day of like how I operate. To be competitive here now, I need to start doing the same thing, it seems, if those are the new tools and tactics we'll be using. I think we have other examples too, where if someone's really misaligned, they might start going and like selling products that don't exist, right? But it's because they have the goal of, we want to make this thing happen, so we're going to do it. And then internally, the rest of the team feels like they're kind of at the whimsy of what a sales team might need. Or the opposite, engineering gets to make all the decisions. And so sales feels beholden to them instead of people saying, are we really on the same team looking to do something? So I think the 40,000 foot example really is just that. I think someone that behaves in that way is probably feeling like an outlier also, and probably notices it. I think people in that position are probably not not feeling like they're hitting their goals and not really excited about it. And so it probably is also messing with them and their own performance. So our point of, if you're not even talking to them about this, then and even acknowledging it, that employee is definitely being affected as well.
Yeah. Well, and I've seen, I mean, we all have been in a department or a company where like one person is clearly not pulling their weight or clearly toxic or whatever the situation is. And honestly, I think it wears on people in a way they don't even understand until that weight is gone. And then we've seen countless examples of when that toxic person or that underperforming person goes, the whole team is just like elevated and they don't change anything. It's just that that one element is gone. And I am constantly surprised by this. I don't know why I'm constantly surprised by it. The science is all there, the data is all there. I've seen it a million times, but I consistently underestimate the pain, the frustration, the culture change that that has on a team. I constantly underestimate it. And I know that if someone like me who sees this all the time is underestimating it, everybody else on the planet is underestimating this pain on their team and they're overestimating the value of this person.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point that it's like whenever you do make those kind of harder decisions and the rest of the team is elevated and it's also and if you don't, I think yeah, it's more likely that that your high performers are going to probably leave. They're probably not going to stick around and those are the people who pass the keeper test and you want them there. But you may not get that chance to keep them and retain them if you don't make some of those harder decisions too.
So I have a weird question. What if you legitimately think you're not the keeper there? Right? Like what if you look at this and you're like, man, they probably wouldn't keep me. What do you do with that?
I don't know.
I
I
know.
don't know if I have an immediate answer. Do you have thoughts, Diana?
I don't know. I was just sort of thinking like, man, if I genuinely thought I wasn't the keeper,
Mhm.
what would I do first? Would I evaluate, am I supposed to be here? Would I evaluate like, was there some sort of uh injustice done to me? And so now I'm like mad and upset about it. Like I kind of want to wonder why I don't think I belong,
Yeah.
um, and sort of evaluate that a little bit.
I think a part of it too, I like that we made the point early on. We all probably have points in time where that's the case. I really appreciate our team. I think we all have moments like that. Both people on this call are always, Diana and Bethany are both very helpful if that's the kind of thing that happens, right? And so a part of that is there's a real human piece of this of, I think any leader we speak with too talks about imposter syndrome, being very real and a part of it. So I would say that where this is different, I love your example of looking back to your story. Like, there's the hiring process where you're like, oh, here's the job, and there's interviews and whatever that might look like. And then there's a point when on the backside, maybe it's your first month. Hopefully it's not your first day. Maybe it just feels like a lot of responsibilities hit the fan and you think, whoa, there's more here than I expected. And I think every job maybe has an element of that. But I have found for myself, if I thought maybe I'm not the keeper, maybe not because of even performance, but just alignment or what this job would be, or what maybe I thought it was something different. And there's a lot of roles within this that are not expected, or it changed. They needed to make a change because the organization changed. Um, it's helpful to look back to that story of like, okay, at what point in time did I stop loving and engaging this as much? And maybe just not moralize it, not say it's good or bad or that it's your fault or their fault, but just think like, why did that happen? And then kind of lead to the next thing. And then what did I do? What did they do? If you raise the flag as an employee to kind of bridge that gap, hey, I don't know if I'm meeting performance here. I just want to check in with you. I feel like I'm doing this well and this well, but what about this? And if their feedback is pretty empty, that's a great sign. Maybe you're not the keeper and maybe it's not even on you. Or if it is, and you're like, wow, you're not meeting performance here and here and here. And you're like, wow, I don't know if I ever will. That kind of answers a lot of the questions there also. And maybe the final part, it's the idea of when someone's looking to hire someone. I always love to treat references not just as a checkbox of like, is this a good person? Would you hire them again? But to really ask story-based questions instead. Kind of these exact same questions. Hey, if Bethany was still on your team, where would you want Bethany to continue growing and coaching, right? If you were going to give her feedback on like in a promotion, her next job, what are the things you'd encourage her to look out for as she grows and develops? There are other ways you can kind of check a hire before they actually come onto your team to help build the right fit.
I think that's good. And that's something that it's like we touched on, but didn't say explicitly on the other side of like looking at managing employees. And if you were making this decision and doing sort of the keeper test is like one really important aspect of it is the feedback part of it. So to think about like, if this person isn't a keeper, have you done your part to give consistent feedback and hold people accountable on that side of it? And if you haven't, then like maybe that's on you more than on the employee and if you should keep them or not. But I think one way that earlier before we started recording too, the way that you framed this side of the question too, for yourself was like knowing everything you know about the job that you're in right now. Would you still take this job? Would you still say yes? And I think that's a helpful way to frame the question because I think a lot of us get into our jobs and are like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. I had no idea what I was saying yes to in a lot of ways. I think that's true like of every job pretty much. And everything that looks good from the outside, there's flaws in absolutely everything, even the best organizations. There's issues. People are imperfect. We don't get everything right all the time. Things are just in progress. And so to feel like you're going to jump into an organization with absolutely no, flaws or I don't know, whatever struggle. I just think that's not realistic. And so I think when you're evaluating that for yourself to say, if I knew everything I knew before I said yes to this job, would I still say yes to it? I think make sure you're thinking about it as two different things of like, what are the things that are like, okay, this is something that I was not expecting, but I can work with it. I can still be aligned with the organization. Or maybe I can make an impact on this thing. Or are there things that you didn't know about the job or you didn't know about the industry or the career or whatever that you're looking at and you're just like, man, this drains me and I have absolutely no impact on it. Then I think those are the two questions that I would ask, because I think you just can't expect to say, man, I didn't know anything about this. I didn't understand what I was saying yes to. So I'm going to go look for the next best thing. And I think what's going to happen is you're probably going to go jump into another career that probably is going to have some other issues that you just don't see right now. And so really making sure you know what's a deal breaker and what's not.
I think that's a great way to think of it of in your work, what are the problems and challenges and how do you respond to them? Or like, do they drain you when you're going to bed at night, when you're on the weekend, when you're not on the clock? Are those problems and challenges of work there and they cause more dread than they cause interest? Which isn't to say that every problem is this wonderful experience for a growth mindset, right? Like no one thinks that way. No one operates that way. But I do think a part of that is sometimes I think there's an assumption with the job that a perfect right fit means there's no problems, right? And leadership and roles is there a problem? It's the understanding there are always problems. It's how do you solve them? How do you pull a team together and make those different? How do you collectively influence that problem or that issue or that challenge? So if the dread from those things is causing you to burn out, that's a great sign that you would self-select to not be a keeper.
Yeah. Yeah. But like you said, I think it's like the draining things of like, what is the pull there? Like, do you have an impact on it? Is it something that you need to just develop in and like you need growth for, and you need to like talk to your leader about that or seek a resource out to get some more training or development on that thing to help you get more comfortable and less drained from it? Or is it not? Is it something that's totally out of your scope of responsibility or impact or anything like that?
That's really good. And yeah, that feedback piece, because if you're not communicating that, or you're not seeking out how to connect this more, is it the wrong role? Or maybe there's certain responsibilities we can adjust, or do you need more training and context, right? Do the teams around you support you in that? So a lot of factors, but I love that example.
Yeah. Well, and if I thought about it, if you asked me, like, look, knowing all that you know, your 11-year history, knowing all that you know, would you still say yes to the job? My immediate answer is yes, right? But it's
Oh,
not because
that's great news. Okay, good. Good, good, good.
it's not because it's been easy, right? It's not because it has been flawless. It's not because there are not any challenges. It's because I'm constantly learning, which is one of my key values. It's because I am developing in different ways, which is also a key value of mine. It's because my values align with the mission of the work. And it's because I don't wake up every single day dreading the things that I'm doing. There are days I still wake up and I'm like, I do not want to do this meeting or whatever. Like, but I know that over the course of time, there's been more positive than negative. Not that there has been no negative, there's been plenty of negative. But I think it's just that, like, am I being fulfilled in my role versus am I being depleted and demeaned every day? Right. And I think those are two totally different things. And how am I going to handle that if I feel like someday I'm like, oh, this just isn't worth it anymore? Like it's something has changed and it's just not, I don't feel like I want to be here anymore. Yeah. So
Yeah, I think when you think about big picture, the keeper test, whether it's for yourself or you're thinking about it for employees, I think the big picture, and we say this a lot when we talk about these kinds of things, is like if you are not a keeper, you should not be surprised. Or if your employees are not a keeper, then they should not be surprised because you guys have had conversations about it and there's clearly a misalignment or something, but it's not like, okay, we're just going to spring this news on somebody, right? Or for yourself too. If there's a very big problem if it's a surprising news, right?
oh my gosh, you're so right. And we touched on like a few little things, but let's go down that road a little bit more. If you have someone who is not a keeper, and that is a thing, and you know it now because you just did the keeper test and you're like, oops, it's definitely this person. What are some things you should do before you just jump to the firing? Because I don't think that that's fair. Bethany, you make a good point. A firing or a termination should never be a surprise. And I think you said before, like, you need to test some things and have some difficult conversations before you get there. What are some other tips we have to just try to make a keeper, a not keeper, a keeper before you unkeep them?
Yeah, I think that well, one, I would say, like, as a manager, I would check yourself to say, like, how often do I actually talk to this person? Which seems really basic, but I think that's one of the first questions that we tend to ask and say, like, one, have you ever like given this employee that feedback? Have you talked to them about it? And they're usually the answer is no, I haven't, because they did it once, and so I let it slide, and then they did it again, and I was like, okay, whatever, maybe it's just a bad day. And so then months went by and I never had the conversation with them. And that's a really big problem, right? And so ways to avoid that in the future is like, first of all, like give the feedback quickly. And sometimes it's just asking the question quickly to say, hey, I saw this thing happen. Can you like, it's not even like a disciplinary thing. It's just like, I saw this thing happen. Can you tell me what happened? Why did that happen? And so sometimes it's just that of like, get comfortable with like having those conversations quickly. And then also make sure you have a regular cadence with that person. If you don't talk to your employees on a regular basis, as in like, not like oh, well, we sit by each other in the office every single day, so we're always talking. That's not what I mean. I mean, like, if you don't have a time dedicated to each person on your team on the calendar that they know this is our time to talk, I would highly encourage that because I think it's going to make this conversation a lot easier. And so that's one question is like, do you even talk to them and make sure that you have given that feedback? You have a regular time to meet with them so you know what's going on and you can give that feedback with your employee. That's just one of the things I would say.
Yeah. I'd say the other one that's big for me is, do they understand the expectations? And are you guys aligned on those expectations? Because I see all the time where an employee is like, no, I'm doing great work. I'm doing all of this thing and all of this thing and all of this thing. And the manager is like, but you're never doing this thing. And that thing is the most important thing to me. But then they never have that conversation. So then the manager is consistently mad that the employee is not doing this thing. But the manager has never told the employee to do the thing that is important to the manager. So the employee never knows that this is an expectation that is not being met. And so I always say, like, be very clear about your expectations, whatever they are. If your expectation is that an employee should arrive to work 5 minutes before their shift, you need to be clear about that. I think it's weird, but you need to be clear. If that's your expectation and that's what's going to rile you up every day, you need to be clear about that. If your expectation is they need to work on this process and get it done in 3 days, you need to say that. Just be very clear about what you want and what you need. And if they're not meeting those expectations, then you can have a different conversation. But if they don't know what those are, that's really hard on an employee to meet an unsaid expectation. So I would check to see how clear you're being on those things before you're like, they're not a keeper.
Yeah, I think with that, one tell if you're a leader and you feel like you have a non-keeper on your team is when you feel like you're hostage to that employee. And I think at the same time, sometimes those non-keeper employees feel like they're a hostage to their employer, right? Those are people often, if we get to talk with them, we'll hear them be like, yeah, well, whatever the statement, I wouldn't be here though if I didn't have to do this, or I care so much. And so that's why I have to stay here. Like there's a compelling reason why they feel like they must stay, even if they feel like they know they're not a keeper. And so either side, whether it's the employee, you feel like you're a hostage to your employer, and that's why you're not choosing to find something else, or you're an employer saying, wow, this person's really difficult to work with, right? It feels like they're a roadblock, not a team member. A challenge in that is probably how clear are you on those expectations? And then a lot of responsibility would fall back to you as leadership then. And so you can't let your goal can't be, I want them to read my minds. We often hear leaders, I think, speak and say, I want my team to be more innovative and more strategic. And sometimes reading between the lines, what I think they're saying is, I just wish they thought like me and then did what I want them to do, which is alignment, which is a great goal. But there's a disconnect if they don't know how to build that into their team and their cadence, which is what you both spoke to.
Yeah. And I mean, on top of that, layered in, if you're doing those other things, you're going to also discover like, okay, did I do the work that I need to do to be able to train this person to do their job effectively too? Because that's another part of it, is like, if they are an underperformer, and you're their manager, like that's your responsibility too. So evaluate yourself first and say, shoot, did I not do a good enough job training them? And what does that look like? And so if you're having those conversations and you're setting the right expectations, that should be a question that comes out in it too, of like, okay, maybe I need to spend some more time with this person and make sure that they get the training or development that they need to. And so that's just another thing that I would say that's like very tactical, but I think a really important part of it too. So
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, I think this was a good topic. I think it spurred a lot of good conversation. And I hope that managers, you're thinking about your keepers, and employees, you're thinking about your employers as keepers. I think that's a good conversation to have.
yeah, definitely. Yeah. Don't use this as okay, we have to make massive cuts in our organization. So
No.
don't send out, don't send out this email that says, hey, we're going to do the Netflix keeper test endorsed by People Centric. In that way, please don't do that.
Don't do that.
But I think that there's a good conversation to be had here, as a leader to think about for yourself, or if you are managing managers even, and you're thinking like, hey, I feel like I want to challenge my team to be able to think more deeply about the people. Do we have the right people on the field right now? And if not, like what's the issue? Is it something we need to do differently to manage the team? Or do we just really not have the right people here and we're hanging on to people for too long and we need to have a different conversation? So I think use it as a good conversation starter for your teams and for yourself. But please don't send out a mass email about this.
No. And to that point, I think that if you are looking at this and saying, I have some people who I don't think are keepers, I think good managers will say, how do I change them into keepers? How do I get them to be successful? And going into those difficult conversations, when I've had to have them, I go into it thinking, I just want us to both be successful again. I'm not thinking I'm doing this as punishment. I'm doing this to watch you fail. I truly want everyone to be successful. And so go into it thinking you're going to have a good conversation to turn this around and make them a keeper instead of unkeeping them.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you, as our listeners, if you have questions about, man, I need to have a difficult conversation with my employee and I kind of need, I'm not really sure how to approach that. Please reach out to us. We'd love to just like hear from you and maybe talk with you a little bit. And also, I'm pretty sure we have topics on that on our podcast too. So if you want to search like difficult conversations or things like that in our podcast, I'm pretty sure we have some topics around that that might be beneficial for you. So.
Absolutely. And the same goes for employees. If you're like, man, I'm feeling like I don't want to keep this organization and I just want to talk through it a little bit, or I want to know how I can have a conversation to realign with my leadership or my coworkers, like let us know. We're happy to talk through that with you. We would love to hear from you. Anything else, Bethany?
No.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for all listening. We think you're keepers. We're going to keep you. Hopefully you keep us. Do the keeper test. And we will see you guys next time. Thank you for listening to the People Centric Podcast. We are so grateful for you joining us every week. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. Also, feel free to share on your social media with everyone that you know. It really does help us. If you would like to contact us, I have put our information in the show notes. Please reach out anytime. We love hearing from you. We will be back next week with a new topic. Until then, be well and lead well.